13 Questions by Man Transcending. Manhood in the Digital Age.
Welcome back to 13 Questions. Tonight we have an episode with Mark Palmer Stevies Jr. This one, unfortunately, I wasn't able to make. Had a bit of a family emergency that I had to take care of. I can say, Bill, this was an amazing episode. The guest hit on so many points that are really close to me, and I really enjoyed this one. Very much in the wheelhouse of the way that I think. Heard some names pop up there that I never hear people talk about. So, I don't know, this one really spoke to me. I really enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, man, this was a really fun one to have, just the chance to have a conversation with Mark, and fun to record. And going back, I'm editing it right now, actually, as we're recording this intro. We're just not done yet, but so I'm going through it actively and just re-listening to it. It's been a while since the conversation has happened, so going back and rehashing through everything again is super cool. I have high hopes for this episode, so I hope that you guys find value in it. And so I guess value, right? Speaking of, this is not a free podcast. This is a value for value podcast. And if you find value in the show and their content and these conversations, we ask that you find some way to return that to us, whether that be time, talent, treasure, you decide. So if you would like to do that, we have a couple different ways. You can go to our website, which is 13questionspodcast.com, and we have a support page there for PayPal. Or you can buy a book, because we haven't talked about this. It's been a while since we had an episode. There's a lot going on. We've got a lot on the docket right now. So, or just to start from the beginning, right? So we do have a new website, and the website is updated with a page entirely dedicated to the question 3 answers. So every guest that has given an answer to question 3, which is what is the most influential book on your life and why, has been cataloged and linked to. Links have been provided on the site to get you to Amazon if you want to purchase the book, and you'll help support the show that way too. So one other way to support the show, buying a book if you're into reading, which is something you should be. And then another update, website and support related, is our Shungite affiliate link. We do have a Shungite page on the website. For anybody that's listening that doesn't know what Shungite is, it is a mineral used for jewelry, and it's got some energetic properties, and there's a little bit of information on the website about it. But we have a affiliate link with Derek Condit's store, Mystical Wares, and they're in a liminal state right now. So our link is not giving us credit. It'll still get you to the store, I believe. So once you're there and you decide to purchase something, if you use the coupon code 13 questions, you will get a percentage off of your purchase. I believe it's 10%. I will have to double check. And no, it's actually 5%. So if you use the coupon code 13 questions, you will receive 5% off your order, and the show still does get a little bit of support back from your purchases. And on top of that, we have a new affiliate link with Mark Sloan. If you caught the last episode that we put out, it was with Mark Sloan from endalldisease.com. And I talked about my experience with the red light and red light therapy. So we ended up joining his affiliate program, and now we have a link, not on the website yet. I will put it on all social media that we have. when this episode is published, which will be November 2021. So I will share the Red Light affiliate link to all of our social medias for anybody that is interested in that. And then the last thing that we have as far as updates go for the website is a new logo is in the process of being made. Blake Art is collaborating with Adam and I to come up with a new logo for the show, or a logo for the show. And I ran across Blake in the Grammarica chats, so he is part of the community. And I'm super happy to be working with an artist that understands the reasons behind the show and the message and all that. So lots of exciting things to be looking out for. A lot of updates. I feel like I'm talking a lot. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I want to talk about your value. This episode, especially being completely impartial on this one, not having, having sat down with it. One of the things that impacted me the most, and I say one of because it was many, but the one that stands out the most was the statement that podcasts are the new oral tradition. And that spoke to me because it used to be you would have reasons that you would need to sit down around the fire, whatever, to communicate information, the stories, the things that were important. These deep pieces of wisdom that we hold that have been passed down to us. But when do we in this society have the chance to sit down and communicate in that fashion? We don't. People don't do it. But what I find fascinating about the long format podcast is that you're sitting down and forcing yourself to have these long, drawn out conversations that nobody has anymore. So you're forcing yourself into that position. And within doing that, it is an oral tradition. It is recording that wisdom. It is transferring it and, making it accessible to all the generations that are here that got it from those before us. And I don't know, just that thought, to me, that was the entire episode, bang, just worth it just for that. So value for value, I got my value.
Yeah, and it's something that I think is, I don't know, we take it for granted. Like I get content from all these independent producers, such as, Grammarica and, you name it, right? But I make it a point to go out and support them, right? Like I give them money on a monthly basis because it just makes me feel better and I believe in what they're doing, right? So that's just me. I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, if you guys,
if you want your garden to grow, you got to water it, you got to fertilize it, you got to give it attention, and if you do those things, the things you love will grow. So that is in all aspects of life. You want McDonald's to be the biggest corporation on the planet? Eat their breakfast.
Right? Usually McDonald's refers to their customers as users. Like in the corporate headquarters, like at a tangent, sorry, but in Chicago, like their higher ups will refer to anybody that consumes McDonald's as a user, because that's how they view their customers, right? If that tells you anything. I don't know, we're out of left field. Anyway, yeah. So you want to do the gratitude jingle?
Yeah. Sorry, I was just looking up a crazy statistic that McDonald's feeds about 1% of the world's population every day. That 1% of all people on the planet eat at McDonald's.
Is it? Okay. That's a lot.
68 million people as of a bunch of studies that I'm seeing.
Didn't they used to have that like on their signs too? Like McDonald's would say like
9 out of 10 Americans
served or whatever.
Let's see, 9 out of 10 Americans eat there at least once a year. Some huge statistics. Imagine if 9 out of 10 Americans listened and donated at least once to 13 questions. We'd have Michael Jordan on. We'd be bigger than Rogan.
Episode. Yeah.
So I'd like to thank all the users out there for joining us tonight.
Right. But yeah, the more you support, back to that. That's what we were talking about. The more you water the garden, the more it'll grow. And we were going to do the gratitude.
Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude. Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude.
I think I'm gonna go ahead and go first, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
So, my gratitude, we touch on it a little bit in the episode, but I wanted to bring it up in the intro to give it some extra emphasis, because that's how important I think it is, right? But I'm grateful for cacao, right? Chocolate. It's a superfood. We've essentially bastardized it by pumping it full of sugar, but taken in its pure form, it can be used for ceremonial purposes in certain dosages, and obviously it has a physical effect on your 3D body in this dimension, but it also has an effect on your energetic body, right? Your spiritual body. And cacao works specifically with your heart energy. We were just talking about heart stuff a little bit ago before recording. So, I've been doing a lot of heart centered work, right? And having a lot of good results in the relationships, in the relationships with the people around me. So, it sounds kind of weird that drinking chocolate on a daily basis would help you communicate with those around you in a more loving way, but that's exactly what happened to me. So
no, I mean, it can make sense. Your heart has neurons in it, proven by science. There's an actual extra brain inside of your heart. I mean, it's why you can feel things in your heart. And I mean, superfoods and nootropics, these nutrients that you take in that increase your brain's ability to think, why wouldn't there be other foods out there that could help increase other parts of your body's ability to function in the way that they work, including another brain inside of your chest? So yeah, absolutely. That, on the surface may seem, out there crazy, but from a base scientific level, of course,
Yeah, and there's so much to learn more about the plant, and I'm just beginning, right? So I encourage anybody, if this is, it sounds interesting to you in any way, go out and explore cacao. I do have a guest in mind for the future to talk more about this. So hopefully this won't be the end of the cacao discussion. So I'm gonna.
No, I love that idea of learning from the plants. You hear this in ayahuasca. They were able to take a MAOI inhibitor and put it into this, within this one plant and mix it in with another plant so that it can extract the DMT from the plant, and then you get a long form absorption into your body. And this is used for ceremonial uses or for drug addiction treatment. And what gets crazy within all that is you ask these indigenous people, well, how did you figure out that these two plants need to be processed in this way together? And they're like, well, the plants told us. And that type of thing makes sense. Why is it that when you ingest cannabis or a psychedelic or a different type of plant or even tobacco or something that's fermented, it changes the way you think? What are these intrinsic qualities to these things and the way that they make you think? Are you, in a way, imbibing part of the essence of this plant? Can you learn and gain information? And, I think the answer is probably yes. Things can change the way that you act. The mineral lithium bonded to orotate, something that is found in minerals and springs in different places, can also be taken and it can help people with neurologic issues. It's a mineral deficiency. zinc and magnesium deficiencies can cause issues. Number one leading cause of migraines. So yeah,
Magnesium.
it's fascinating when you just kind of dive into that. Yeah, a little bit of this might drastically change the way that your body interfaces with the world on a psychological level, an energetic level, and a spiritual level.
Yeah, I believe that's one of the things that cacao helps replenish in the body is magnesium. And I think that the majority of people are deficient of magnesium.
Yeah, according to the neurologist that I used to see,
Yeah.
the number one cause of migraine was magnesium deficiency.
Right. And I don't suffer from migraines, but you
Bless
do,
your
so
heart.
maybe this would help you. I'd be interested to see what this does. Like, I'll get you some if you.
Oh yeah, I've been using.
Try it out.
I need to use some more of it. The magnesium spray that you sent me.
Oh, from Alpha Vedic. That's right.
Yep, and I also wear migraine glasses made by no affiliate, TerraMed. Highly recommended product. Blocks out
Right.
the most common forms of blue light associated with like LEDs and fluorescent lighting.
Yeah. So.
You can cut that. I don't even know why I said it.
Don't know where we left off.
We were in the middle of gratitudes.
Oh yeah. That's what I wanted to add was the gratitude part. Like, so we do have the gratitude jingle, right? And part of doing a ceremony or having a cacao ceremony, doing these ceremonial doses, there's a little opening thing that you can do, a little ritual, if you will. And part of that ritual is giving gratitude, expressing gratitude to, well, basically, it can be whatever you want, right? But the fact is that gratitude is brought up again. And it's just part of, infusing the cacao with that frequency, the gratitude frequency, the love frequency, and then, giving it an extra boost, right? You're putting your good chi into it or whatever, however you want to turn it, right? And then, yeah, I've had good luck with it, and would encourage people to explore it. I think that's probably the second time I said that. But
Yeah, listen, food is medicine ultimately. How many supplements and cures for debilitating. It's weird that there's plants out there that when people take them, they no longer get seizures. Well, what does that mean? And these are the things that we should think about with all things. And all people are made different. And what works for you may not work for somebody else. And, there are these things that people can poo-poo on, but have great intrinsic magical properties to them. And we just got to know how to find them. Got to find out what's right for you.
Right. And you can only do that by experience. And just one last thing on cacao, and then I'll promise I'll stop talking about it. But I imagine people will have a question of like, well, how do you know it's working, right? Well, one of the things that you can look for is that welling sensation that you get in your heart area when you're really happy, right? Like tears of joy. So that could be a marker that you can kind of have in mind when you're, if you want to do this experiment or whatever. So yeah, last thought on cacao. What is your gratitude?
I'll probably say this best by saying hints at the great mystery, synchronicities, consciousness qualities of consciousness that cross species. The last couple of days have been crazy for myself. And it's been very strange in the fact that, I had to miss this episode because my cat wasn't doing very well. And in that time, my cat has passed. But it's weird because I know two other people that are having very similar things happen with their cat. A coworker of mine leaving work on the exact same day for emergency surgery, having to do a lot of the same things. She has a dog, but for her animal, happening at the exact same time. Yesterday, Angie had surgery, and I wouldn't have been home. And I think my cat had a mini stroke or something, some blood clotting issue while I was there. And I wouldn't have been home. And I was there for that and able to rush her to the emergency vet. And was able to pick Angie up from the hospital and then go right back. And these are the things like, well, I've never known anybody else that's hand feeding their animals with syringe. And now I know 3 people at the exact same time. And on the same day that all this happens, you, Bill, get another cat.
Yes, sir. Cat number 3 for us.
And it's these weird things that pop up. And in her passing, we brought her home so that my other cat could have closure, because she didn't know what was going on. She saw me running out with her sister in a not good state, losing consciousness, and rushing her out the door. And I'm like, she needs something. She needs to know, and she's not going to know unless she sees her. And she went through all the stages of grief like a human. And this cat, I should say, is a feral cat that was brought into the house. She walked up as a kitten on my friend, and we kept her. She's wild. You know, she's very well trained now for the most part, but she's got feral in her. And it was amazing to see the human, these qualities of consciousness that we think are human, in the way that crows have a crow's funeral. That when we first brought her in, she got angry, really angry, and angry at me. She was dead looking me in the eye, tail flipping, just like hatred. Like, that's what it felt like, at least. It was palpable. And she was angry at us. She wouldn't let us pet her. She didn't want any attention. And over the next hour and a half, 2 hours, she came around to wanting to be around us, to needing the attention from being, just better, going and smelling her sister, and then being uncomfortable with her. Like, she seemed to start, and I was like, okay, well, I think we need to, we need to take her. This is time for her to go back so that we can have her body cremated. And Angie asked Luna if, she's like, look, this is the last time you're going to see your sister. If you have anything you want to say, just like a very human thing to say to her. And she came back over. She sniffed her sister. And then she walks away, and she speaks 5 or 6 seconds of, I say nonsensical to me, because it was a language. It was like she was speaking. She wasn't just meowing. She was articulating something. And she just speaks it. She walks and just starts speaking this. And she comes back over, smells her sister one last time. And then just in this way, she just flips her tail and just walks away with purpose. And I was like, this whole thing, it felt like these are the things that humans do. She even she gave word, the whole thing. And so this aspect, just seeing the human qualities of how we handle things being reflected in the same way within an animal, and these synchronicities. So when I say the deep mysteries, I don't know what it means. I don't think anybody does, but it lets me know that there's some other meaning. There's some other deep patterns. There's some other things that connect us all, that I've connected this before, but it opens my mind to the great realities. Because
go ahead.
It allow those things, when I see those types of things, I start to think of, string theory, pick your theory, the idea that consciousness and everything emerges from a wave, a pattern, or something underneath that matter is physically manifest from. And I think of Terence McKenna talking about fractals and oceans, or I should say fractals and when they started creating them in computers, these fractal designs, and they started realizing that they started to look like a lot of things in nature. And one of the things he saw in nature, these fractals would kind of have these curvings that kind of look like shorelines or alcoves or things that you'd see with like water along an ocean. And so he was walking along the ocean and he comes across a black rock. And it was just a unique rock that stood out. And so he keeps walking and he comes across another rock. It's not the same, but it looks similar. And so being that he's thinking about these fractals, he's like, I decided to count my steps back. And he goes, when I got to that, and I don't forget what it was, but let's say it was like 386 or 326 or something like that. And he goes back and he goes, and then I keep walking from that rock. And he goes, and then when I get to, 350 something, I see another black rock. It's not the same. It's not in the exact spot, but it's similar. It's like right here. And he goes, what does this mean? Does this mean that there's going to be a black rock every so many feet along the ocean? No. But it starts to feed into this idea, why is that black rock there? Well, because there's this underlying pattern. The rock is there because it's part of that fractal design. It's part of the reason it's there is because of this pattern, because of this underlying thing, the Fibonacci sequence, this base component. And if that rock is there for that reason, why am I here? Why are you here? Why are there these patterns? And so it just starts to open my mind up to these greater possibilities, these very deep religious possibilities of, you are the God within. Where is God? Well, if I am an answer to the equation, human beings are here because we fulfill some form of this pattern that is manifest, and a fractal repeats itself over and over. And yeah, the planets aren't going to be in the exact same orbits every single time, but they're going to be in the same flavor of orbits. Maybe when history starts repeating itself, it's flavors of the same thing, that this evolution is constantly continuing. The idea of Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance really starts to make sense. And so when I say just having that access to the deep mysteries, having those experiences of just these, even in sadness and tragedy, being able to just put those questions together. I don't know, that brings me a lot of understanding that, like, we're not just here for any reason. We're here for a reason. We are the reason. And I can't say what those reasons are, but some part of reality is always getting better. And there's baked in parts that, based on us just being here, whether you're a cat or a human, we share things. And where does that come from? So just being able to see those great mysteries. I don't know. Otherwise, I'd be freaking out about life right now.
Right. Yeah, right. Who wouldn't? But that's the spice of life right there, man. That's what you're talking about. Like the thing with the synchronicities, like I think the more that you follow them, the more that they happen. And then the whole thing with the cats, like that's a synchro. So like case in point, this entire show was one big synchronicity. And then I was also going to point out that we touch on it in the interview. Mark brings it up. It is Hermeticism, which is an ancient mystery school or thought school. I think it traces back to Egypt and Hermes Trismegistus and all that. The Emerald Tablets. Anyway, one of the tenets is as above, so below. Mm-hmm. And what you were kind of talking about is like the complexity and the simplicity and the fractal thing.
Yeah.
And then Mark was talking about what I just said, the complexity and the simplicity thing, and as above, so below. So like, yeah, there's definitely some kind of
well, and not to dive back into the fractals, I watched a documentary done by David Lynch on transcendental meditation. And one of the things he mentions about it is this thing that you connect with, this thing that when you go into this transcendental meditation state that you go to, this conscious level that you reach. It's always been there. It always has been. It always will be. Well, that's very religious, but that's a fractal. Like, it's a pattern that is and always is. And then when I start to just wrap around just that simple idea, then, the idea of creation and destruction and all these other things, just, even though I can't explain it, because we live in a world where, there's a linear time and everything has a creation and an ending. We see it in life and birth. So at least in my mind, no beginnings don't make any sense, but a system that by its very nature is just a repeating pattern on a constant evolutionary point. It can't be anything else other than a fractal. You know what I mean? Like, the fractal is a fractal. It is the as above, so below.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's
I think
crazy,
we jumped off a tangent there with the
we did.
gratitudes, but
And you know what else we forgot? We forgot to talk about how we know the guest. We usually do that first thing, but I can do that now.
I think it's a primed opportunity.
Yes, perfect timing. Thanks, universe. Yeah. So, past guest, Starving Pilgrim. I don't recall the episode number, but it is the episode that released January, the first episode of this year, 2021. So if you go back and look for it, Starving Pilgrim is the guy that recommended that I get in touch with Mark. And so I was talking to Ben, it's his real name, Starving Pilgrim's name, and just kind of, asking him for more information, right? And one of the things that he mentioned was that Mark has a big heart, and with all this heart talk about cacao and everything, it's just another.
That's interesting, because isn't that the episode where he mentioned about showing up in a remote viewing session of some kind?
Ben, probably, yeah. That wouldn't surprise me.
I want to say that was the episode, which would be interesting because I never really talk about my other podcast here. But what I did that transcendental meditation for would have been, it was the heart of my last episode. So yeah, I don't know. Just I find that interesting because I was not aware of how you met this guest until now.
Yeah. So, and I wanted to include that because Mark does some work for Sam Tripoli. So, and then there's some other names that get dropped in the episode too. So I just wanted to make sure that this piece of the story was included and that that Ben's name was mentioned, not because I'm trying to give him props or followers or anything. It's just because it's pertinent to the conversation. And honestly, I would venture to guess that he doesn't listen to every episode of 13 Questions, but I'll probably tell him to listen to this one. So, yeah, speaking of listening to the episode, let's get into the interview and, yeah, value for value, guys.
Check out the website, send us an email, tell us what you think, ideas for questions, support the show, water your garden, and more importantly than anything, spread the wisdom, spread the knowledge. This is trying to think of the word, sorry.
The dawning of the age of Aquarius.
This is I can't think of it. It's what we said at the beginning. It's the story that people tell nowadays.
Oh, so the new oral tradition.
Yes. This is the new oral tradition. Yeah, support the show. This is the new oral tradition. It is. I was going to say this is the future, but really, we're boiling down the information of the past. So yeah, support the new oral tradition.
Right, the future is now. Time. That's even dude. I wanted to get into time a little bit, but this intro is long enough. We'll get into that later on another episode. And there's more cat stories to come.
We already have.
So, yeah. But for now, this is 13 questions with Mark Palmer Steves Jr.
I'm excited because I remember like 5-6 years ago, maybe it was 5 years ago, I saw 13 questions come up in my Grimerica Patreon feed. And I never fully listened. I think I listened to a couple episodes, but I was aware that it existed. So then like now looking back, the fact that I'm like talking to you, obviously there's like a chain of events. Darren and Graham started it, passed it along. I'm just stoked at the synchronicity because I'm like, this podcast like stuck out in my mind when I was just a random podcast listener, didn't have my own show, and now I'm on it. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, my whole like journey to be a part of this is one big synchronicity. Like with Grimerica and everything, it's wild. Like I don't even know what I'm doing. So it's exciting to see what this thing's going to turn into.
Very cool.
Yeah, but I was going to say, I heard about 13 questions. I don't think it was through the Patreon, but I was really excited when Darren came out with the project because like at first there was going to be like more of a one-on-one like counseling type thing idea is what he had in mind, I believe. And then there were also some free classes that TJ Walker was offering on communication. And there was a bunch of other things planned, and I was super excited, like over the toply excited about this project, like just like you were when you first heard about it. And then like now all of a sudden like I'm here doing it. So it's like what? What?
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Definitely. I think the Grimerica show is like a hub of synchronistic energy for sure.
It is. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Darren is some kind of shaman or wizard or something.
Yeah, he's just very low key about it.
Yeah. Whether he likes to admit it or not. I know he doesn't like D&D. I just wrapped up my D&D session. We played for 3 years, I think. Finally finished up.
Wow,
this past weekend.
It's a long time,
right? Session once a month, and we missed some months, so it took forever to get through, the game, but we did it.
I'm in that community, but I can imagine like the people are like, oh, our D&D game totally got thrown off, but because of COVID, like pandemic themes start like making their way into the story or something,
right? I can see that.
Bound to cause some conflicts potentially,
right? Yeah, it was. Yeah, I'll spare you the details. It was a quick game because divine intervention came in and killed the main dude, which is like one in 1,000 chance of happening. So
it sounds like it.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sorry that I didn't send you the questions beforehand. I'm usually pretty good at that. So
I think whether I talked to you about it, but I kind of wanted to do it as fresh as possible. But then like an hour before, I'm like, you know what? Let me look over the questions. Okay. Right now. That pre-show nervousness hit me. Right. So I have them in front of me. But yeah, I'm ready to go whenever you are, dude.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Question number 1. What was the best advice ever given to you? Would you modify it at all today?
So this one was super easy because I just had my Sifu on my podcast. So the guy who taught me martial arts when I was in high school and after high school, something that he said to me that he reminded me of when we spoke recently is something that really stuck with me when he told it to me for the first time, which is like, you can't blame anybody because everyone is just an amalgamation of everything that's happened to them. and everybody's kind of sorting out that in their own lives. And being a conspiracy theorist, probably from birth, I've always tried to assign causality to things. And that was a release from that sort of angst, I guess I could call, for trying to find an explanation for everything. And I think I've ultimately, at this young age, 27 years old, kind of determined that that's not really the purpose that I'm trying to lead anymore. Like, finding the answers to everything isn't as appealing as it used to be. And I think that's because the goalposts have gotten pushed back, in the sense of, like, it's no longer about finding the answers. It's about, understanding the whole mystery. And I think that might sound similar, but when you're in it, you might understand kind of the differences. There's like a simplicity and then a complexity, and that complexity becomes very, very overwhelming from the simplistic mindset. But then there's like a flip turn that happens where you see, it's all so simple, even though it is very, 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 very complex.
Right. So it sounds like what your Sifu was trying to say is that there's really nobody you can point the finger at when it comes to events that like happen, right? And like to assign blame, because in my mind, because I don't know, I was thinking about this a little bit a few weeks ago about how trauma occurs, and people like to say that events created trauma, like whatever bad, like you got a car accident, right? So boom, car accident created trauma, right? So that obviously you're hurt. So maybe that's a bad example. But anyway, my point was events occur, right? But it's how we react to them is what really creates the trauma to those around us, because the event and how we process it and then expel it, reflect it back out into the universe is going to affect those around us, right? And then, that's where the bad part of the equation comes in, not like the event happening. It's how you process it and then let it go. I don't know if I rambled too much there. Sorry.
Don't worry. Yeah, that's totally on page with, what I've experienced, just kind of being quick to react at a young age, kind of having a short temper, and being in a sort of environment that not forced me into martial arts, but it felt like that was the best, safest choice, rather than just getting into more and more fights with other people in school and feeling like, more and more desperate. Martial arts kind of brought this confidence to my life that I really didn't feel comfortable in, because I was always, again, assigning blaming other people and not focused on myself enough to, really work on those self-disciplinary type of mental attributes that martial arts kind of brought into my life.
So that was something that you chose to do then? That wasn't something that like you were enrolled into as a young age? Martial arts?
Yeah, I definitely chose to. There was like a couple events in school where, like, it was either after school or during school where I'd gotten into a fight, and I always got into fights just mostly because I was like kind of a class clown and had sort of an ego, and felt like because I was taller than most of my peers that like I could say whatever I want and not get challenged. And that was like really humbling to be challenged and realize like, oh, people aren't afraid to knock me off my ladder, and that's where I sort of transitioned into becoming what some people have called like a gentle giant. Cause like as much martial arts as I know, I'm not fighting anybody, I mean, the less I train martial arts, the shorter my temper gets. And I only say that because for the past few years, I haven't been doing as much martial arts as I used to. But there was definitely like an imperative that was pushed on me. And I made that choice like, well, I should learn martial arts. And also UFC was very popular at the time. So it was like on television. There were movies about it coming out. So martial arts just became more in the mainstream around that age for me too. So as opposed to like maybe joining a karate school or joining like the wrestling team, I went straight for Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because that was kind of like what I was seeing on UFC. But I also was on the wrestling team, and I also took a karate class to start. Like you got to start somewhere. So it was definitely like one thing of like thinking I was going to join in to learn to be this big, tough, badass fighter guy. And then realizing like, oh, I really enjoy teaching people things. And I really enjoy like helping my Sifu run the class. And like, that's where my communication kind of blossomed. And I learned how to convey things that were in my mind to a crowd or to a class even. And then like, managing kids between the ages of 8 and 15 and all of their short attention spans, that, brought a whole nother level of patience. So, I mean, I could probably connect all 13 of these questions to what I've learned in martial arts, but yeah, I'll leave it there. And to modify it, I don't think I could modify it. I think what Ryan, my Sifu, said was just so true, that like people are an amalgamation of everything that's happened to them, just like all the things that have happened to you, And I think people who get into that mindset of assigning blame to things, when you point that out, it's like, oh, wow, okay, I'm to blame, and it brings like this level of clarity that that offered a huge release for me at that age, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Martial arts is something that I wish I would have gotten into when I was younger. I mean, I guess it's never too late, right? But
Sure.
Question number 2. What do you choose to ignore?
That's an easy one with, the given events of the past 2 years. The media, I ignore the media, honestly. I mean, it's funny. I even had like Jay Dyer, who's been on this show before, on my show. And I told him straight up, I'm like, dude, I don't even watch movies, but I respect what you do, decoding and showing the symbols in these movies, because that just brings so much more confidence to my decision of not watching movies, because there is that programming, that subtle weaponization that's going on. So with running the risk of sounding like a jaded Luddite, I definitely have pushed all of those influence out of my life. I have DVDs, I have like Kung Fu movies and stuff that I like. I have some mainstream movies that I like, but for the most part, I've really pushed out anything that isn't created independently. Like podcasts, I only listen to really independent podcasts. If a podcast is super overproduced, I tend to not really be as interested in it as something that you can tell someone is putting their hard-earned time into, making themselves. And then books, of course, can't really say that they're independent, but for the subjects that I'm looking into, they're definitely strange. So yeah, I would say books are a huge thing for me. And it's really easy to ignore all those other influences when you have like all these books you can dive into, like a whole world, and something that's really been interesting recently is finding books that help me learn more about the area I'm in. And New England, where I'm from, has a long history, and that's been super interesting getting into that. So, it's easy to answer this one. I choose to ignore anything that's not like helping me grow, and media is like the best way to sum that up, and I think a lot of people let that hold them back. But if you're listening to this podcast, obviously I don't think you're particularly in that camp, because you're obviously looking for things to get out of the mainstream, like this independent podcast here.
Yeah, definitely. The media is something that I have stopped completely paying attention to. The one thing that I do kind of indulge in is while watching Star Trek reruns. But
I was just about to say, I have Twilight Zone, Star Trek, the original series, and like I think the animated version of Star Trek for whatever reason, and that's it. Like that's like the most TV shows I have. Maybe like the first season of Seinfeld, and other than those, like I never watch TV. Like sometimes I'll put one of those on if I'm really bored. But yeah, Star Trek is legit.
Right, and I can stream that online for free. So that's. Other than that, though, yeah, dude, I cut the cable years ago, and it's just podcasts and books. Obviously, our next question is about books. So, what book has been most influential on your life, and why?
Yeah, well, this one's tough because there's definitely been a couple really influential books. I'm gonna go back to like when I was really young. I would say, real quick, I should touch on this. Ripley's Believe It or Not was pretty big because, like, number one, the book was like visually super appealing. Like, you get that book, it's got a crazy holographic cover, and then inside of it are all kinds of anomalies and mysteries and things that you can learn about. There's records and like freaks and things that aren't as interesting to someone like me or yourself. But I thought Ripley's Believe It or Not was like a huge mind opener for me when I was a kid, because I'm like, oh, they're talking about these things as if they're real and actually happened. And, for the most part, at that time, I was born in 94. So like between 2000 and 2010, things became very scientism, and the internet, I think, pushed that in, like at least in the school system. Like we were all really supposedly like interested in space and the internet, the space age, the internet age. When I was totally sold on like spontaneous combustion and Sasquatch and Loch Ness and UFO sightings, which were all in that book. And then that made a book that more seriously, I would say, is the answer to this question. The Secret History of the World by Mark Booth. That brought that book into so much more credibility, in the sense that I already found like all these weird things that didn't add up. And then this book kind of put it together in a history or a chronology that didn't like leave portions of history out. It was like, okay, here's what happened spiritually, and here's how it connected to the material things going on. I don't know the veracity of that book, but what he does a good job of is showing you how mythology is a lot less mythological than we assume. That word mythology has a huge misconception. People tend to think like if something's a myth, then that means that it never happened. Like they conflate the meaning of the word myth with like hearsay or rumor, when really like myth is incredibly important to the story of who we are as human beings. So seeing those weird anomalies like Bigfoot and Loch Ness and having a kind of holistic mindset, I was like, there's no way that science is right if they can't explain these things. If there are things left out of their paradigm, and I think this isn't like a genius thought on my end, I think a lot of people come to this conclusion, but that book in particular by Mark Booth, The Secret History of the World, showed me a side of history that was so much more interesting than anything I had learned in any social studies or history class, and it was really mind blowing, because once I really got into the podcasting world and listening to podcasts and seeing how many people were talking about all these things that happened in his book, I associated all those things with his book. Little did I know there was hundreds more books on all the topics that he included in that book. So I think that book was like a very, very well written entry for me into this world.
That's amazing. Two amazing answers. Number one, because I just got done compiling all of question 3 answers and put it in a list on a website. And So I'm looking at looking at the whole list, all the books, and then Ripley's Believe It or Not is so unique. Like, did not expect that to pop up. So that's awesome. That's exciting. But this Secret History of the World book by Mark Booth, that sounds really cool. Does he? And maybe you don't know, and maybe you can just maybe give your opinion on this, since we're kind of talking conspiracy a little bit. What is his overarching kind of reason for to put it into, I guess, maybe to put it back into your Sifu's terms, like what is the reason for, like, if people are looking for something to blame, like what would he give as the question, or that answer? Like, are there secret bloodlines? Are there, because I'm of the mind, like, bloodlines are tied to the giants somehow from pre-flood times. So
what's interesting about this book is he doesn't typically take that, like, there's no thesis for the book other than this is an esoteric version of history. So he doesn't really assign like roles in that sense of like, well, these guys are the bad guys in history and these guys are the good guys. He kind of just shows you like where the bad guys and the good guys were using esoteric or mystical means to accomplish what we are told they did in our secular or edited versions of history. So like, for example, a lot of the scientists of the Enlightenment period were also alchemists and occultists. We don't remember them for that, but they were also alchemists and occultists, and that was a big, big reason why they made the discoveries that they did. That's never, ever really highlighted in a typical, 101 science class. So I think that was very pivotal. Not the players, but also like what was actually going on in history, and how much the occult and the esoteric aspects of life were really valued. Because it seems like in our time, they're not valued. They're considered fringe. They're considered, not serious pursuits. So it was really startling to see how that had been flipped upside down. And in the past, it was considered like the height of accomplishment to be a polymath and be a magician and be like a skilled thinker in many different things. Now we're all specialists, now we all specialize in one thing. And I think our world really is for the worst because of that. This idea of like, how many people does it take to change a light bulb? I think a lot when nobody knows how to put the light bulb together, because you have one guy who makes the glass and then one guy who finds the tungsten and then the other guy creates the rim, the metal rim. So I think there's totally, a need in today's world for that holistic view that's offered through this book, where he doesn't really like offer up anything particularly new in the light of like theories and who did what. He's just showing you like, no, this is what they said they were doing, and we're going to emphasize the esoteric mystical side, because for the most part, history emphasizes the material and secular side of things, or the extreme war. That was what I got from my history classes when I was in school, was like war, more war, the gods angry, like it's all like structured around war, our history lessons. So to get a history lesson that was kind of structured around religion and spirituality and mysticism, which I think is more accurate of a term than spirituality, mysticism, and seeing where mysticism played a role in the past was a big unveiling for me.
So it sounds like he would have had a podcast if he was alive today, the author, right? Like, I
think he is alive.
Is he?
Yeah, he's been on the Grimerica show, actually.
Is he?
Okay. Yeah, he's done an interview
into that.
Yeah, he's what's interesting too about his book is, in conjunction with his research, he also spoke with a woman named Lorna Byrne, and she's a channeler, and she channels the Archangel Michael. So it is similar to channeled text in that way, but it doesn't rely on just channelings like a lot of what we would consider channeling. It's kind of like a mix of both, where this guy got all the resources and then brought it to her and said, well, this is what I found. What does your angel tell you about what happened at this time?
What?
It's a pretty interesting approach. Yeah, too.
I love channel like Seth Speaks and Law of One, the Book of Ra, like all that material. Like,
yeah.
Definitely got to check that out then.
Please
all right.
do.
Question number 4. What rule do you have for yourself that you never break, and why do you think that it's important?
This one's very interesting. Very interesting question. It's hard to think of that. I don't know how other people have answered this question, but I would say a rule that I have for myself is to always be honest, because when I was younger, I wasn't always honest. I was definitely the type of kid that liked to tell tall story or tall tales. And like, I thought that would be a way to get more friends, was to tell like fantastical stories. And I think a lot of kids do this. It wasn't anything particular to me, but I realized as I got older how much the dishonesty held me back from making genuine friendships and authentic connections. I noticed that almost karmically, like people would then go and do the same thing about me. I would tell people stuff that maybe they didn't think was true. And then next thing I know, the whole school thinks one thing of me that I don't even know who the hell came up with it, rumors and hearsay, to use those words again. But so since I got, probably around 19, 18, 20 years old, around there, I really decided like, okay, there's no more room to be anything but honest, because every time I've been dishonest, it's come back to bite me or held me back or gotten in the way of something I truly could have been good at, or got in the way of a friendship that might have been still around. I definitely could say I have more old friends than current friends. So yeah, being honest, that's the new rule for me. And sometimes that's another thing that'll stop you from having friends too, because a lot of people don't like when you're too honest, and I tend to be that way sometimes, where I'll like tell someone straight up, very blunt, how I feel about them and how they're making an impression on me. And it's only my impression. It doesn't say anything about them, but I think most people don't even really see the world the same way I do. So sometimes it's hard to convey that to the average person. So as a rule, I've decided I just got to be as honest as I possibly can be, to remove any misunderstandings that might come across,
Yeah. And then after, that's all you can do, because after that, it's up to the other person to react to that. And if we're all thinking along the lines of not taking anything personally, which is one of Carlos Castaneda's 4 rules. I only know this because I made this book list thing recently. But yeah, and that speaks to, along the same lines of stoicism, managing our emotions.
Don Miguel Ruiz's 4 agreements, right? That's what.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And the only reason, I don't want to correct you, I'm sure you read through a lot of books on that list. But the reason I bring that up is because Carlos Castaneda's book was like number 3 on my thing of books that I would have used to answer that question. Ripley's Believe It or Not and Secret History of the World took the top 2 spots, but the third was Secret Teachings of Don Juan. Or no. Secret. It's just The Teachings of Don Juan, A Yaqui Way by Carlos Castaneda. And that book is interesting because it's definitely like controversial in the sense that a lot of people have a lot of things to say about Castaneda. Like I have all of his books, and I also have 4 books by other authors like criticizing his work. So I've been really into him as an author and why he became a cult leader and all that stuff. But why I'll always stand up for him is because he had a big impact on my life. Whether Don Juan existed or not, whether Castaneda made that information up or not, the idea of an ally and having an ally was extremely important. That might come up in a future question, so I'll kind of cut it there. But it's definitely glad that you made that little mistake, because you gave me the opportunity to elaborate on Castaneda. He's definitely an interesting person for sure. But Don Miguel Ruiz has that book, The Four Agreements.
Right on. Yeah, Castaneda is a really interesting dude. I didn't know anything about him until that guy, who has an episode called That Guy on 13 Questions, he mentioned it on his interview. And
Okay.
so, yeah, I still haven't really delved into that subject yet, but it sounds super interesting. Yeah, but okay, maybe it'll come up again. Nothing happens on accident, right? All right, question number 5. If I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most, and why?
Oh, man. All right, so this is going to sound super sad, but it's not. Trust me, it's not. So I don't really have a best friend anymore, unfortunately, because I used to do my podcast with my best friend, and then just things happen, and now we're not friends anymore. I still have the show, still doing it. But one of the funny things that we used to kind of tease each other about was like, Jay would always tell me, "Oh, you got to have more respect, Mark." Like, and I would always think like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Telling me I'm disrespectful. I don't have enough respect. And it became like a running like inside joke amongst all of our friends. Like people would just be like, disrespect whenever I would say something with a lot of like passion. And I think what it was is I get very passionate about what I believe in. And I sometimes can steamroll my friends and peers. And like that was happening on the podcast where like I was the only one who I felt like was doing any pre-show research. I was the only one looking for guests. I was the only one doing all of the things to keep a podcast going. And they would just show up every week. And that was fine. I was cool with that. But it got to a point where like I was being kind of disrespectful to them because I wanted them to be more a part of it than they actually were capable of participating, not because they were like, bad people or something, but it just wasn't their thing. Like they don't listen to podcasts on their own. They only listen to podcasts when I was hanging out with them and like driving and had control over the aux, I'd be like, no, turn that music off. We're listening to a podcast. You boys are going to learn something today, and that was like my attitude. And it was always kind of encouraging, but I think over time they got like a little overwhelmed by it. And it is what it is, like we're still friends in some sense, and I have no hard feelings about them, but they definitely humbled me a bit and taught me that I need to be more respectful for other people's path, other people's paths in life, because, Jay